Happy Friday, everyone. It's John Lorden here with another episode of BrainScratch for you today, March 9th, 2018. Thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me. I hope you've had a nice week. Today's mystery is a pretty deep one. It's kind of complicated, and yet there's not a whole lot of detail out there. I think some of you are going to watch this and say it's obvious who's involved in this, at least. How come they haven't been busted for it? But for me, there's definitely some missing pieces in this story and this investigation, and we'll certainly talk about those before the end. Today we are looking into the mystery of who killed Aliza Sherman. She is a woman that is a mother of 4. She was looking to get divorced from her husband. She went to meet with her lawyer, couldn't get into her lawyer's office, and wound up being stabbed right outside of his office 11 times and died. And this all went down in Columbus, Ohio. Here is a photo of Aliza. And her daughter has really been a bit of a champion for her cause since she's passed away. This is her daughter, Jennifer, that has been working very hard to bring some sense of justice into this case. And I really appreciate everything that she's been doing. We're going to start over at truecrimegarage.com, and they have a link to footage of the suspect. Let's go ahead and watch this footage together. And you can see it there. They're going to have a close-up on this next one. It is really hard to make out, but from the descriptions I've read, suspect is wearing jeans, wearing some type of dark green coat. Looks like, in particular with that shot, they might be holding the coat closed with their left hand, and their right arm is swinging pretty widely. I've seen some people discussing this footage, saying that they possibly think this could be a female. Based partly just on the type of running that's going on here. But I got to tell you guys, I used to train runners, and people run in all kinds of different ways. You can't really judge sex strictly based on the gait of this runner. At least for me personally, I don't feel safe making that call there. What is interesting is we do at least get some footage of this person running by items that are at known locations, and I have not seen any information from police about the possible height of this person, which, for example, when we were talking about the Missy Beavers case, they at least came out with some type of estimate. The person is between 5'2" and 5'7", but in this case, we haven't even been given a range. What I've done here is I've opened up a Google map so that we can look at this together, and I've rolled it back in time. The time frame that they've had closest to this occurred just about 5 years ago, later this month. It was March of 2013. The closest time frame they have is August of 2009. And what we're looking at right here, this is the camera, at least one of the cameras in that footage, that is catching the perpetrator running from the scene. And if we pull out a little bit and spin the camera around, we can see this is the street that's in the background. It's really noticeable because there is this building with the 2 big doors, this street sign that says no parking on this street, and where the concrete kind of begins to break in here. You can see all of that in the footage. So I'm very confident that this is the same location. Where the crime was actually committed was actually down the street and across this other street here. So let's head that way just to give you guys a little bit of a view. Her lawyer's office is actually in this complex here. And as you can see, this is a pretty nice complex. It's a pretty nice looking area. I don't really imagine that this might have been a crime of opportunity. As a matter of fact, police have said they're pretty sure it wasn't because she was not robbed. She had some jewelry on her. All of that was left with her. And this is the building number 55, Erie View Plaza, where her lawyer had an office. One thing that is interesting about this alley is It's somewhat secluded. It looks like you'd have a lot of businesses here, but even at this time, this street view is now from 2016. A lot of these businesses don't seem to be open. There's a lot of rental signs up all over this place. And one thing that really makes me scratch my brain on this is she was meeting with her lawyer on a Sunday afternoon. Is it possible that he was planning this intentionally because on Sunday afternoon you were probably likely to have much less foot traffic in this area? I think that's something we need to consider, especially when we get into the details of her attorney and his actions, particularly around her murder and quickly after her murder, and honestly, even leading up to her murder. But so this is the area, and every year on the anniversary of her death, her daughter shows up there with a group of people, and they're all hoping that justice will still be found in this case, and I really hope it will too. Things like this shouldn't happen. All right, moving forward to Cleveland Magazine. I want to give a very big thank you to Cleveland Magazine. They have written a very good piece here. It was published Friday, March 12th, 2017. It's written by James Bigley II. And what he's done is essentially learned all of the known facts of the case and looked at all the interviews, and he's woven it into a long-form narrative. I appreciate things like this. They're very intriguing to read. They're also kind of a good basis for me in terms of the facts that I'm looking for. So we're going to use this article primarily for some of the background on the family and the facts that are in it, but there is a lot more to it that we're not going to cover. And if you are interested in this case, I highly, highly recommend that you check out this article. If there's only one source outside of this video that you're going to read on this case, make it this article, because it'll really give you a very good appreciation for everything that's going on here. And here we can see Jennifer with her mother back in earlier days, a very touching picture. And as I mentioned, there are 4 children. There is Josh, Jennifer, Jason, and Jeremy. Throughout the family's turmoil, we're going to learn that the kids get somewhat divided. Some of them associate more with their father. Some of them associate more with their mother as they're going through their marital strife. But let's go ahead and get some backstory here. Aliza's strength was rooted in her upbringing. Her parents, survivors of the Holocaust, met and fell in love in a displaced persons camp. They came to Cleveland in the early 1950s. Growing up, Aliza was always one of the prettiest girls in the neighborhood. She attended Huron Road Nursing School's program, but she also went to Hillel events with other Jewish students on the CWRU campus. That's where she met a medical student named Sanford. Now, let me just say, in everything I've reviewed on this case, I have not been able to find even a picture of Sanford, let alone a body type. I would really like to see a full body shot of him to have some comparison with what we're seeing in the footage, if he could possibly be the person in the coat running. If you guys happen to bump into any pictures of Sanford, please leave links in the comments below so all of us can take a look at that. They fell in love and were married about 2 years later on Sunday, November 28th, 1982. By the early 1990s, Aliza and Sanford had begun to fill their 4-bedroom colonial on tree-lined Penshurst Drive. Sanford was running a successful ophthalmologist practice. Aliza left nursing behind to raise Josh, Jason, and Jennifer. But their marriage was not without troubles, according to Aliza's brothers. Quote, "He was a guy who could be kind of tough and mean, even with his own family," Edward, who is one of her brothers, said. In 1995, Aliza gave birth to Jeremy. She tried to make their home a gathering place. It just talks about all the things that she was doing to try to make sure that people were happy whenever they would come over. For Aliza, her children and her faith were the center of her life. Quote, "You knew there were problems there, but Aliza didn't really go into details," said Edward. "I have memories from when I was 3 years old, sitting on the carpet in the family room and covering up my ears when they were fighting," says Jason, one of the siblings. "The police were at our house numerous times throughout our childhood because me or one of my siblings just called the cops when they were fighting." In 2004, everything seemed to take a turn for the worst. Sanford, then 49, unexpectedly retired from his ophthalmologist practice. Aliza returned to work, this time as an in vitro fertilization nurse at the Cleveland Clinic in Beechwood. There are several videos on this case if you just do a search for Aliza Sherman, and you'll see there are a lot of very touching memorials, and her daughter Jennifer speaks a lot about her job as an in vitro fertilization nurse. Apparently, Aliza really loved this type of work. They even did a fundraiser on Mother's Day where they made a bunch of money so that people that have tried in vitro fertilization and it didn't work could try a second time without having to pay. If you guys are unaware, in vitro can be extremely expensive, and you are basically paying at the chance of a pregnancy. If it doesn't work, then you've got to pay again for another chance. So seems like a very special way that her daughter has honored her memory by doing that type of fundraiser. The family disputes continued. According to a police report filed December 12th, 2004, 9-year-old Jeremy called 911 because he was frightened when a fight erupted over a Hanukkah game of dreidel. Sanford told police the argument started between him and Aliza over the prizes. Less than a year later, on October 22nd, 2005, a fight broke out after Aliza discovered Sanford had resumed a friendship with someone named Larry. In a statement filed with the police, Sanford reported that Aliza hit him and beat the television and Sanford's car with a handheld massager. In the same report, Aliza told police Sanford routinely called her names and threatened to leave her, divorce her, and withhold family finances from her. Now, there is also information in this article that Sanford was likely having some type of affair at this point. He wasn't staying at home the whole time. He would go and stay in their vacation homes. I guess they had one in Florida and also one in New York. And he was apparently seeing someone else while he was going to stay at those locations. He could be intense, but Aliza could be intense too, said her brother Edward. 2 weeks after the funeral, nearly 80 friends and family gathered in the brick walkway where Aliza was killed. They teamed up with Crime Stoppers to offer a $25,000 reward for information about the case and promoted it on a billboard. A Facebook page was created to support the family and spread word of events. On that first Mother's Day without Aliza, more than 300 people holding red balloons marched behind a Justice for Aliza banner from the Beechwood School in Aliza's neighborhood, past the home where she lived, to the parking lot of the clinic where she worked. The Facebook page is still active. I'll have a link to it in the description box below so you can keep up to date on any developments with this case. As you can see, their banner art is a picture of that march. 300 people all behind the Justice for Aliza banner showing their support. It's really amazing to see that type of turnout for something like this. In July, Jennifer gathered more than 100 women for a self-defense class at the Beechwood Community Center. 1 month later, in the hope someone would come forward with information, the Crime Stoppers reward was increased to $50,000. Jennifer also replaced her father as an executor of her mother's estate. Very interesting turn there. And of course, you have to imagine her mother was working on a divorce. She had been working on this divorce for several months. We're going to get into some of the details of what that was about. But essentially, because she died before that, you have this issue with her estate being tied together with someone that, quite honestly, she didn't want to be with anymore. So Jennifer worked at it and obviously was able to replace her father as the executor of that estate. And on top of all that, I believe the weekend that her mother died, Jennifer's now husband was planning on proposing to her at that time. He decided to wait, and he held it off until 6 months later, but they did still get married. And here is a picture of her with her husband and two of her brothers, Jason and Jeremy. Aliza filed for divorce June 20th, 2011. She hired Joe Stafford of Stafford & Stafford at the advice of a longtime friend. She moved into the bedroom downstairs. The troubles persisted. Police reported visiting the home 6 times that year. Josh aligned himself up with his father and basically disowned his mother, says Aliza's brother Edward. You had competing alliances within the house. Yet neither Aliza nor Sanford wanted to leave the home out of the fear the courts would see it as vacating the property. In a rambling email she sent to herself at 2:10 a.m. in January 2012, Aliza expressed her fears. Quote, "I am really afraid he is going to have me killed," she wrote. Just when things looked like they couldn't get more chaotic, they did. In March, Stafford's law license was suspended for 1 year after the Ohio Supreme Court found that he violated 6 of the state's rules of professional conduct for judges and attorneys. In his absence, Aliza's case was given over to Stafford's senior associate, Gregory Moore. Aliza wasn't impressed. According to her brother, Edward, Moore was late for meetings and unresponsive to text messages and emails. Within the first 6 months, Moore filed several continuances on Aliza's case, pushing back the divorce proceedings because he was allegedly unprepared prior to appearing in court. So this thing gets handed off to him the previous March of 2012. And keep in mind, on the day that she's killed, she's going to see him, and basically the judge is forcing this case to happen in March of 2013. So this is going on for a year where this guy is basically dragging this out, and this woman is just trying to get this thing processed. Around this same time, according to prosecutors, the extra workload created by Stafford's absence put a heavy burden on Moore. Prosecutors allege on at least 3 occasions between January and July of 2012, Moore called in bomb threats to the courthouses on days that he was scheduled to appear in court for cases he wasn't prepared for. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, what was she doing even staying with this guy? She did look into a couple of other attorneys, but no one wanted to take this case because of how far it had already gone in terms of its process, and she was starting to run low on funds. But, you know, I would have been really wondering about that law firm after one of their, I believe it's one of their partners, got busted for, his 6 infractions. And it appears like this guy that the case got handed off to isn't much better. Judge Rosemary Gold ordered no more continuances would be granted in Aliza's case, and the trial would begin March 26th. 2 days before their day in court, Moore sent Aliza a text message requesting she meet him at his office downtown to discuss final preparations. Where there's a lot more information that we're going to get into in one of the news articles about this text exchange, but this is essentially the day that her life would come to the tragic ending. According to prosecutors, Moore never met with Aliza. They claim he initially provided a statement to investigators that he was waiting in his office during the time of the attack. But data retrieved 1 year later with the help of the Federal Bureau of Investigation from a downtown cell tower suggest he allegedly lied about his location and misled Aliza. When investigators attempted to follow up with Moore regarding his whereabouts, he refused to cooperate. So something is extremely wrong with this part of the story. We have him saying that he was waiting in his office during the time that she was killed, and basically the FBI is confirming, no, he was not in his office. He left about an hour before she was killed. He didn't get back until about an hour later. Now, what's interesting here is they're getting that information from a cell tower. And with cell towers and how they work, I mean, if you stay in the same proximity of that same cell tower, they're not going to notice a difference. And typically those proximities could be somewhere between 3 and 5 miles. So this kind of leads me to believe that he left the scene enough to hit another tower. That I don't know that I can say that he's the guy in the footage running away, or maybe he had someone take his cell phone away and send those text messages, which would add another person into this if there is some type of conspiracy to have her killed. But this is extremely strange to me that they were able to determine he wasn't there based on cell tower information. Because if he simply went outside to conduct this act and then went back upstairs, they probably wouldn't have noticed that he hit a different cell tower. Occasionally, office buildings might have their own cell repeaters if there's trouble with reception in the building. So it might be that they noticed that he went off of one of those types of repeaters and went to an outside cell signal or something along those lines. So I'm not 100% on it. I really wish we had more detail because not only did he send these texts, he also sent texts after she was killed. And I'd be curious about the location of those texts as well. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of that type of detail available. 2 months after the first anniversary of Aliza's death, Jennifer filed a civil suit against her father. In it, she sought to recover more than $2 million Sanford allegedly funneled out of a joint bank account he held with Aliza while she was alive. Jennifer's civil suit claimed that Sanford conspired with 5 unnamed individuals to hide more than $2 million from Aliza by moving it from their joint bank account into another account that was in Aliza's name. According to court records, the Merrill Lynch account in question was discovered by Aliza when she hired forensic accountant Jeffrey Firestone 2 months before her death. She claimed she was not aware of the account when it was opened in her name in 2000. She was also unaware of ever signing a power of attorney giving Sanford control over the funds in the account. By the time Aliza discovered the account with Firestone's help, the account had been closed and the money withdrawn, including transfers into an account in Sanford's name. A forensic document examiner said the signature on the power of attorney did not match samples of Aliza's handwriting. So we have certainly some funny money play going on here. It seems to be, there's no doubt this is being orchestrated by her husband. Who are the other people that are helping with him with that? I don't know. I don't really know if it's all that important unless one of these people is also a chain in the hoop of having her killed. But this is showing me that he, if nothing else, he had big concerns about their finances. This had been going on back in 2000 is when he opened that account. So I don't know. It really shows that there's some terrible things going on in this marriage, and it might show that he has a reason for her to be murdered that is not just emotional, possibly financial. Who knows how much he might have lost if that court case had actually happened. The nature of Sanford's character became a central focus in the civil case. Sanford testified that from roughly 2006 to 2010, he had been having an affair with a woman who lived in New York and Florida, and that he made several trips to visit her. Other testimony by some of Sanford's closest friends, including Larry Shanker, remember the Larry that she wasn't so happy that he was talking to again, revealed that Sanford had been at the end of his rope and was emotionally distressed in the time leading up to Aliza filing for divorce. And this is where things get really interesting. In more than one conversation that took place while walking along the shore at Headlands Beach State Park, Shanker says in his deposition, Sanford inquired how someone could get away with committing, quote, a perfect murder. Shanker said he gave Sanford his scenario. Don't use your car or don't let your car be seen, he testified. Don't use a gun because it could be heard. Don't use your street clothes. Use something that would cover up your entire body, your face, your hands. In August 2016, the judge dismissed claims for civil remedy for criminal acts and claims of conspiracy. Basically, they don't have enough to... It's interesting the criminal acts thing got knocked out of this case because just with him funneling that money around the way he was without her knowing about it, I believe that could have still been seen as a criminal act. But the judge is basically removing those parts of the case. But it does move forward. In December, all sides agreed to settle the civil suit. Sanford agreed to pay $110,000 to Aliza's estate with the stipulation that Jennifer would forever release and discharge him from any claims they might make in the future. Jennifer agreed to Sanford's stipulation with one addendum. If in the future he is convicted of any criminal offense related to their mother's death, she reserves the right to renew her fight and make further claims against him. Once again, I just want to say James Bigley II did a really good job on that article. I highly recommend that you guys check it out. Moving over to other news sources now, let's get with Fox8.com. This is from when the civil trial was still going on, June 15th, 2016. We get a little more detail in terms of that $2 million and maybe what it was used for. Court records raise new questions about strippers, affairs, and her fears before her murder. The documents were filed Tuesday as part of a civil lawsuit brought by Aliza's daughter, Jennifer, against her father, Sanford Sherman. Jennifer Sherman claims her father created an account containing about $2 million in her mother's name. Sanford Sherman's attorneys say the bank sent statements to Aliza Sherman monthly. A motion filed this week states that Sanford Sherman used the assets in the account not for family purposes, but were in part used for strippers, paramours, and to settle a defamation lawsuit that Aliza never knew about. And it also goes on to say that basically they believe that he was intercepting her mail from that particular account, so she never knew anything about it. His part of the story in all this is he's saying that he was using that money to pay family expenses, which averaged between $25,000 to $40,000. But it doesn't say if that was monthly or yearly or what. So I would assume that he was probably talking about yearly. To me, sounds like it could have been an account for his extramarital affairs. Kind of hard to tell at this point. I really wish that they would have done a lot more forensic examination with the finances to try to track that money back and see where it actually went. But, you know, with the way that the civil suit played out and the fact that they just settled, I don't think those details will ever come clear to the rest of us. Moving over to Cleveland.com. Aliza Sherman, attorney sentenced to jail for lying during homicide investigation. This is from May 24th of 2017. The disgraced lawyer was sentenced Tuesday to spend 6 months in jail. Judge John D. Satula imposed the sentence. It also includes 3 years of probation and 350 hours of community service. Moore is to report to jail on June 1st and serve 90 of his 180 days. After that, Satula ordered him to spend 1 full week in jail in each of the following 12 months and be monitored by GPS when he is not in jail. Quote, "You've taken everything an attorney stands for and turned it upside down," Satula told Moore. Moore's conviction remains the only charges levied against anyone in connection to Sherman's slaying. Police found no evidence that Sherman, a Cleveland clinic nurse, was robbed. And here we get into the details I was telling you about before so we can kind of understand this text communication a little better. Moore invited Sherman to his office on March 23rd. Moore continued pushing their meeting back into the day. When Sherman showed up, Moore said he was inside his office and told her to come in. Sherman replied and told Moore the door to the building was locked. She waited several minutes and sent Moore a text message that she was walking back to her car to wait because it was cold. Seconds later, Sherman was attacked and stabbed 11 times. Moore then sent Sherman several text messages in the hours that followed, asking why she missed their meeting and asking where she was. The next day, Moore told Cleveland police homicide investigators that he was in his office when Sherman sent him the messages, and he walked down to let her in, but she was gone. But detectives and prosecutors examined phone records, electronic key card data from the building, and statements from witnesses and concluded that Moore had left his office an hour before the stabbing and did not return until more than an hour after police found Sherman bleeding on the sidewalk, according to court records. Now, I don't even know how he tried to pass this story off. He's saying that he was in there the whole time and that he went down to let her in. Well, you either would have let her in and she wouldn't have had this happen to her at all, or if you went down after it happened, you would have seen a woman bleeding to death. How does that make any sense at all? I have no idea. Now, of course, when you're looking at this, I really consider, could he be the perpetrator? Could he be the one that actually did it and is seen running off in the footage? I still struggle with that. I feel like he's definitely connected to what happened here. It feels like he set her up. He brought her to this area. It's kind of an area that's not real easy to see into. There's not going to be a lot of foot traffic around there at 5 o'clock on a Sunday. Maybe that's why he kept pushing her back. Maybe there was people that were hanging out there, or too many people kind of in that part of the neighborhood earlier in the day. So he kept pushing the appointment back. That could even explain why she had to wait for several minutes when she did get there, and he was just kind of stringing her along. There's certainly an aspect to this where I believe that he is involved. Where I struggle is he involved in a way where he's connected to her husband? I don't know. How would that connection have happened? Would her husband really reach out to the guy that is working for his wife and say, hey, I'll give you some money if you can make a little something happen for me? I really struggle with understanding the connectivity between her husband and her attorney. And I believe that if it was there to be found, I really think investigators would have found that, and we probably would see this as a case cracked at this point. I'm not certain what the mechanics are here, but it does feel clear to me that Moore is a part of a plan. I don't understand the rest of what's going on. If he is only part of that plan, it might even make sense why he was sure to leave an hour before and not come back until an hour later, so that he could build up an alibi somewhere else, so that he could have, cell phone towers note that he wasn't even in the area. Maybe he was anticipating at some point that he would have to make sure that he wasn't going to be charged with murder. But if you are going to do all that, it's weird. Then why is he getting caught up in this really lame lie? But keep in mind, this is a guy that was calling into courthouses, calling on bomb threats because, he wasn't doing a good job. So I don't know. I really, really struggle with it, but I do feel pretty conclusive. He has something to do with it. Is he the guy? I'm really not certain. June 14th, 2017, Greg Moore, there's a picture of him, was indefinitely suspended from practicing law. The Ohio Supreme Court on Wednesday suspended the law license of a divorce attorney convicted of calling in bomb threats to courthouses and misleading police during the investigation into the slaying of his former client, Aliza Sherman. I'm not sure why they didn't go for an obstruction of justice charge there. I mean, it's obvious that the guy's lying. Here's another photo of him, also from cleveland.com, and this is actually from January 12th of 2018. Gregory Moore, former attorney for Aliza Sherman, has filed paperwork to resign his law license. Thank the Lord this guy isn't going to be helping anyone else anytime soon. And a little bit of a bright spot in this case, back in May of 2017, something very special happens. Remember, the Crime Stoppers reward got up to $50,000. Well, Crime Stoppers has received an additional $50,000 from an anonymous donor to add to the already $50,000 reward that they have for information leading to the arrest and indictment of the person or persons involved in the Sherman homicide. There's one thing about these stories where we're always looking at these very dark stories, but there are bright spots in it. I think it's pretty amazing that an anonymous donor would just kick in money like that to try to get this case solved. Outside of that, there is a memorial bench in a local park for Aliza Sherman now as well. This video, I'll have a link to it down below. I mean, her children are talking about being able to go there and honor their mother's memory, or if they just need time to connect with her in some way, that they can now go here. It's very sweet. And of course, as we talked about before, the Facebook page is here. They don't have too much for updates. They've been tracking what's been going on with former attorney Moore, basically. Here's another link to that article. And they also post whenever they have public events that are going on. So if you want to be a part of those public events, once again, here's the photo where they had the march. you can come here and find information to do that. I don't know, guys. Sometimes these cases really get me. This one is really tough because I feel like there are a lot of questions that might be helpful if the public had more information about what's going on here. When I look at that footage and I see that someone is running in that direction, I'm wondering, are they trying to get to a car? Basically right beyond, or actually even where that camera is that I showed you guys, the camera that captured some of the footage, that's a parking garage right there. Now, it doesn't look like they're necessarily running into the parking garage. I wish they would have, because I'm pretty sure a parking garage like that would have had cameras at the entrances and exits and captured the license plates as they were coming and going. But right behind that building is also open parking lots where, you'd pay $4.50 or something to park there for the day. Those parking lots don't seem to have a lot of security cameras that I could see, at least from the Google map. But it really gets me that we have footage of the person running and we just don't see where they're running off to. I really wish we had more of the chain of, did they run into another building? Did they run to some type of public transportation? How did they leave that area? Outside of that, I'm wondering where Gregory Moore would usually park for his office. Would he park in that direction or in one of the lots that are behind that camera? Or would he have some kind of different parking specifically for that office building? Also, I'm wondering, where is the footage of the person arriving? Because we know that street has cameras that they left on. Did they possibly come up on the scene from a different direction or a different street? I don't know. I'm sure investigators have worked on that. They might have the answer. They might have more footage and they just haven't released it publicly. Looking at a case like this 5 years after the fact, I wish that some of those details would come out, because those details might help prompt people's memories out there, and hopefully some better tips could come in about what's going on here. We have a murder that clearly doesn't look like this is just a stranger that bumped into her that just wanted to kill someone that day. Murder by knife. We have her husband being told by a friend not to use a gun, to dress in a way that the person in the video seems to be dressed. Could it be the husband in the footage? Possible. Could it be maybe a mistress of the husband? Possible. Could it be the lawyer? I still can't quite rule it out. I would like to think that that he would be smarter than to do something like that. But with the actions we've seen from this guy, I really don't know. Could it be that her husband caught wind of the trouble that he was having in terms of his court cases and said, hey, you know what? I'll give you $1 million. I've been siphoning money for all this time. I'll give you $1 million and relieve you of the headache of this case. This is all you have to do. I really don't know. But ultimately here you have a daughter searching for justice for her mother. You have a family that is fractured, where one brother, even at their mother's funeral, one brother spoke up very loudly about the fact that he doesn't believe his father did this. And it's tough. I've spoken to family members before that have to look in that direction of someone that they love hurting someone else that they love. And it's not easy for a lot of people to look in that direction. So I certainly understand where he's coming from. But it's terrible, because this has fractured the family in so many more ways. And I hope it's not just about something as stupid as a guy that was worried that he was going to lose half his money to his wife so she could go off and start a new life or something like that. But it's really hard to not look at it that way after reviewing it. But I don't know. That's just where I'm at with it. Why don't you guys tell me where you're at with it in the comments below? Let's talk about this. As always, I ask that we please be respectful. There's always a very good chance that the family members are going to see these videos and your comments. So just please keep that in mind when you're sharing your thoughts. We can share anything. There's a good way to do it, and there's an insensitive way to do it. And thankfully, most of the time you guys are awesome at that, but I always have to ask, just out of respect for these families. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Brain Scratch. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I really hope you'll come back next week, spend some more time with me here on the Lord and Arts channel.